3, 2, 1. Hi, and welcome to the Sea Brigade podcast, episode 2. Today we'll be discussing series 2, episode 2 of Broadchurch, and I'm your host, Ken. For the second episode, we have a co-host, good friend, Emily,
Hi.
and I'm going to throw it to her.
Hi,
Emily.
So like Ken said, I'm Emily. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself and how I came into Broadchurch, I started watching less than 2 weeks ago, actually, which is kind of crazy to me to think about. I'm currently on winter break from college, so I have a lot of free time. So Ken recommended it to me, and I figured kind of, why not? Because I absolutely loved True Detective and Fargo, which I watched last year, and it seemed to be a bit like those two shows in terms of a mystery spread over 8 episodes. And I started watching, and I fell in love with this show too. And I marathoned the whole first series in 2 days, a couple of days before series 2 started. So then this past weekend, I marathoned the whole thing again with my dad, who loves mystery shows. We both had a great time doing that. So I've actually watched the entire series twice over the past 2 weeks.
Which is dedication.
Yeah.
Like, you should be the host of a Broadchurch podcast, maybe more than... Because, like, I definitely need to do a rewatch, but now that I'm hosting this, I'm thinking that I'll save a Series 1 rewatch until I've gone through all these episodes, and then the show needs more content.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably fair and a better way to go about doing it than I did. But, I mean, it was great. I'm not complaining. It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I actually kind of envy. I mean, you're still on the winter break, so you have time. I'm like quickly finding out that so between watching the show 2 times a week, taking the notes, and then editing the podcast, it's like a whole maybe like 4, 5, 6 hour experience.
Yeah.
So, but doing that and college work, it's the type of thing that I feel like if my family ever found out how much work I was putting into a TV show podcast, they would like kill me. Like, you're a college student in your final semester, and you've suddenly added a huge distraction to your life. But no one else was doing a Broadchurch podcast. Exactly. So it was up to us.
We had to take matters into our own hands.
Yeah, and to listeners, love you guys. The episode which I put on YouTube has like over 100 views right now. I'm probably guilty of adding like 5 views. Me too. Just because I check so often. So, like, maybe it's around the 90 count, but that's really still really good. And it's gotten, I took a long time trying to get the podcast on iTunes. Like, that process sucks. But it's finally up there, or it should be by the time this episode goes out. And even without being on iTunes, the RSS feed, Sea Brigade podcast, .libsyn.rss or something like that, there are still like 15 downloads just kind of rogue out there, which is kind of cool and weird. But I appreciate everybody who's listening no matter what, so thanks. Yeah, and check us out on iTunes now. I kind of went and did the legit thing, which is to pay for your podcast hosting. Yeah, like they were like $5 a month plans, but they only allow you to upload like a tiny amount a month. So now it's like $15 an episode. No, sorry, $15 a month.
That's expensive.
Which I could live with. $15 an episode. Podcasters would be broke. But yeah, so before we dive into Series 2, Episode 2, I think we just go over some news that came out in the last week. So like the drop in viewership was the first one. It went something from like 7.2 million to 6.3.
I think so,
right?
Something like that.
But like you were saying, like it could just be a premiere to second episode.
Yeah, and I think too I think part of it is that the first series of the show was a mystery show. You followed it every week to figure out who killed Danny Latimer. And now that we've moved on to the second series, it's not a mystery show anymore. It's a courtroom show, and you do have Sandbrook, but that's not the overwhelming arc of the show. It's a courtroom show. So they've really changed the whole dynamic of the show. It's a lot more depressing, downbeat, I would say. And I think that some people might have watched the first episode and said, you know what, I'm gonna keep the first series as it is, and I'm just gonna stop. which I think they have a right to do. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that.
For sure.
I mean, I'm not making that choice, but I think that the casual viewer or people who just decided to maybe check it out for the second season, you won't be able to follow it. And I think that maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, there were some Twitter reactions that were like, oh, I just jumped in to watch Series 2. It's impossible to follow. I can't stand this. And it was like, this isn't supposed to be consumed in a bubble. Like, no one's going to say, hey, go watch Series 2 of Broadchurch without watching Series 1.
Yeah, I think if you tried to watch Series 2 without watching Series 1, you kind of just ruined Series 1 for yourself. Because now, I mean, you didn't ruin it because there's so much more than just finding out who the killer is, but you ruined a big part of it.
Right, and I feel like what makes Series 1 a lot of fun is week to week changing your own theories about who done it. I don't know, I might say you might have ruined the show for yourself, because, I don't know, kind of being strung along, like, is what's fun about watching Broadchurch. And I think Series 2 is doing a good job at stringing us along. Like, it's a courtroom drama now, not like an investigative police drama, but it's still making me think, what are they going to do next?
Oh my god,
it's not so much who killed Danny Latimer, but like, how are we going to prove Joe guilty?
The first 2 episodes, when I finished watching them, I'm like, I'm actually sweating. Like, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm sweating. It's like, I understand why Hardy has heart problems, because, I mean, I'm going to get a heart problem watching this show.
Cool. I don't know if this next point is so much newsworthy as it is, like, reaction from fans. I guess a lot of people took to Twitter to complain about the law inaccuracies. Yeah, like, if you search Broadchurch and news, like, some of the stories that come up are, like, people complaining about inaccuracies of what happens in court. Specifically that, like, all the witnesses.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it's the type of thing where I guess I could understand being like, oh, this is unrealistic. Now I'm totally taken out of it. But Broadchurch has so few characters that, like, for me, it's important that we can get their reactions in court, because if it were like a real thing where, like, the people in court were people who we don't know, then the drama would kind of be sucked out of it.
Yeah.
Like, it might be unrealistic to have the entire Latimer family there, but I think it's what the show needs to. Yeah, the show needs to be exciting, not realistic.
Yeah, I agree in that sense too. And I mean, maybe I'm just an easy sell, but I don't necessarily. It has become a distraction to me, the law. It's been more like, I guess I'm drawn in by kind of not knowing where it's going to go and what tricks they're going to pull. Which I mean, I can see people not liking that, but for me, it hasn't been an issue.
The last piece of kind of news, I guess the actor Matthew Gravel, who plays Joe Miller, I guess that actor was going on to say that he would be excited or on board with his character being able to be a serial killer. Like if he got off for this murder, he's like, oh yeah, they could do another spin-off or a series where, like, I go to another town and it happens again. And I don't know, maybe he was just playing it up for the whatever interview that was, but that Joe Miller doesn't, like, his only kill was a serious, like, accident.
Yeah.
And he didn't do, like, a stellar job. Like, he doesn't have, to me at least, the makings of a serial killer.
No, I don't.
And if that were...
He didn't enjoy that. I don't think. I mean...
No. And if Series 3 was another... I don't know. That can't be what Series 3 is, if there is a Series 3.
Right, we'll see.
Not jive well.
I don't know if, I mean, part of me thinks that there will be a Series 3, because before Series 2 aired, there were, like, I think some news source said, oh, and, you know, Series 3 has been confirmed, but it hasn't. But I was also reading stuff that said that the showrunner kind of intended it to be a trilogy. So it actually kind of concerns me, the fact that it could be a trilogy, because that leads me to think that, you know, Joe might be declared not guilty. Because if he's guilty, then what is... I mean, obviously they'll be able to make a show if he's guilty, but I don't know.
I think if that's true, if they were imagining it as a trilogy, then leaving the Sandbrook stuff as kind of our cliffhanger, I think, would be, for me at least, the most satisfying.
Yeah, I agree. If there's a trilogy, I hope that that's what it is.
So without getting, I guess, too much into what we've learned about Sandbrook, we'll just start with the episode review. Yeah, it's a little late to give spoiler warnings because we kind of talked a little bit about what happened, but yeah, spoiler alert, you should be watching Broadchurch if you're listening to the Sea Brigade podcast. So in Series 2, Episode 2, we begin with Alec Hardy lecturing incoming police officers, like newbies, and his boss is complaining that his boredom is going to drive away recruits and is driving people crazy. And I thought that was particularly kind of depressing, is that this is what Alec's doing for a paycheck nowadays.
Yeah, that also made me sad, but I also kind of found it funny because I'm also watching Doctor Who at the same time as I'm following Broadchurch, because I never watched Doctor Who. I always resisted. I thought it would be stupid, but now I'm intrigued by David Tennant, so now I'm watching Doctor Who and I'm obsessed with that. And there's an episode in Series 2 where he goes to the school and pretends to be a physics professor, and he's just a terrible physics professor. Like, all he does is just say physics, physics, physics. And so I think that maybe it's a recurring thing that David Tennant plays terrible teachers.
Right, that was the one I watched too, with the bats,
school reunion one,
right?
with K9.
Oh. So yeah, Alex, a poor lecturer. Then I write down, Claire gets a phone call from Lee. Right, so Claire is kind of just at the secret shack watching some television, and she gets a phone call from Lee. And Alec can pinky swear that Lee's not going to kill her at that moment because he's staring right at Lee Ashworth in the middle of a grass field.
Yeah.
And Lee's like, I want to see Claire. And Alex shoots back like, Lisa Newberry's parents want to see their daughter. And Lee's like, for the last time, I had nothing to do with that. You got it wrong. It's over. And like, those are the type of things that make me think Lee Ashworth is innocent. He's not like, hey, I just want to see Claire. He's like, you got it wrong. That specific language is what makes me think Lee might be innocent. I don't know. What you made of that whole first encounter?
I mean, it's definitely unsettling. And I think back to something that you said when we were just talking, that Hardy's worst trait is his desperation, because he's so desperate to, solve this case. He's so desperate now to wrap up and get Joe Miller convicted. His desperation often, I think, blinds him to what's actually in front of him. I mean, it didn't blind him to Joe Miller being the killer, but in this case, his really insane desperation to get the Sandberg case solved might be blinding him to what's actually going on.
Right. In his, again, like this desperation, like in allowing later in the episode Claire and Lee to meet, just so that something might happen that he can use. Like, that's the type of desperation that's going to keep creating conflicts in Broadchurch. Yeah, so my thoughts here is, like, I think something about Lee Ashworth is definitely creepy. I think the actor is pretty attractive. Yeah. But something about him's creepy, but to me, innocent. And like I've said to you before off air, I think it's a little weird for a guilty person to want their life back so badly, because I feel like most guilty people, like, they're just satisfied with getting away with it, starting new lives. And like the things that are creepy from Lee Ashworth is like the do I have to follow you around? He's like, show me Claire or I'll just kind of stalk you until I find her. Alex, goodbye. And Lee says, sorry about your health. So he reminds us that he's at least guilty of one crime, which is breaking into Alex's sea hut and stealing letters. So that's breaking and entering and theft, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not funny, but I'm just laughing because, I don't know, the sea hut just endlessly entertains me.
The sea hut. Yeah. I mean, if I had known that I was going to create a podcast before I watched the first, I mean, the Sea Hut, I mean, I don't know, that's a less apt name for a podcast than the Sea Brigade, but the Sea Hut is also pretty amazing. Speaking of the Sea Hut, the next scene is Brian Young. I had to search far and wide to find that guy's name, but Brian, who is like the
Dirty Brian.
Dirty Brian. He's like, I don't know, like your CSI type guy, and he's investigating the break-in into the Sea Hut. He's not really finding a lot of information. Yeah. But in the first series, he asks Ellie to grab a drink. And she's like, I'm married. And he's like, oh, okay. This time, Ellie tries to grab a drink with him, but he's the one who's seen somebody. Yeah. It's just really sad that Ellie, even at that point, is like, oh, hey, I'll settle for Brian.
It's sad. And having rewatched the whole series this weekend, it also reminded me of that really horrible, horrible scene when Hardy asks Becca to relax with him, like, and it's just so awkward and horrible. And I mean, this was less bad, but shades of it.
Characters being desperate. So Ellie also snoops around and finds a Sandbrook timeline, which is something I'd really like to see, given how little we kind of know.
Right, I mean, we don't even... Do we know how many years ago it even was?
Oh, I'm not sure. It was back when Alec shaved, because when they did the flashback, he was clean cut. He kind of looked like a more doctor-y David Tennant.
Yeah, like he still cared about his personal upkeep.
Appearances. He had a wife and stuff. So Ellie and Alec are called by Jocelyn, and that's when the scene kind of cuts out.
Called to the principal's office.
And we get the Latimers talking about the autopsy and how it didn't reveal anything. So, just to recap, if the autopsy didn't reveal anything new, we're left with a boy who was strangled, and I think that's it. Well, like, there's nothing else suspicious about the body. It's just a strangled.
In the first series, when they get the original autopsy, they make a point of saying that he was strangled by large hands, most likely belonging to an adult male. So
by large hands. Yeah, I guess that's an important point.
Yeah.
So Mark Latimer is he thinks they dug him up just so Joe Miller could have a bit of fun, and I don't blame him at all. But it's like the Latimers see Joe Miller as much more like evil and menacing than, as the viewer, we got to see him in the act, and I think he's much more pathetic than the Latimers think. It's just like a sad...
Yeah, I mean, I can't blame them for thinking that he's like that. For sure. I mean, and they're also taking, or Beth especially, is taking out a lot of anger on Ellie, who's not evil at all. But yeah, I mean, I can't blame them for thinking that way about Joe.
What I can blame Mark for is not being supportive. So Beth asks for them to go see, like, the movies, and he's like, why do you want to go see the movies for? We have a huge television. So and she's like, how about just like a dinner? And he's like, we don't have the money. We're going to have a second kid on one wage. I'm not so sure if he's actually concerned with the money or he just likes time with Tom too much. Because he was all smiles with taking the family to the arcade last season. Like last series, like his idea for erasing the bad mood was to go to the arcade, but now he won't see the movies with Beth. So,
yeah, I think he's just... Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's that great a person. I mean, we know he took out his anger on Danny at least once. We know he cheated on Beth. I think he seems like a kind of guy to me who he wants to do things on his own. He initiated the arcade trip. He wanted Beth to get over certain things, but now when she's like, oh, let's have a date, let's take our minds off things, he's like, no, like, how could we take our mind off stuff? So he just is,
Right. Everyone's problematic kind of in this show. Except maybe Jocelyn. We haven't seen anything from her. And when she invites Ellie and Alec up to her fabulous, like, hilltop home, the first thing she brings up is how Ellie kicking Joe gonna lose them the confession. Yeah. And she puts it on the table as a definite possibility, which I think maybe since Jocelyn addressed it so early kind of made it like I wasn't expecting it to come up, or I was expecting it to come to the point where they'd have to defend it.
It didn't cross my mind.
But it's something, so, like, really?
No, it didn't cross my mind.
The whole, like...
Did it cross your mind? Did you think that it would be a thing?
In the first series, when she started kicking Joe, I'm like, oh boy, that's not good. Like, immediately I was like, oh, that's gonna... I guess watching at that time, I didn't know there was a series 2, but I was like, don't kick him. That's not how a police officer is supposed to do
see, like, I didn't think about that at all. But I was also, again, like I said, I'm like an easy sell in these things. I kind of just go along with it, which isn't like a necessarily great quality, but I was just so caught up in, everything that I didn't think of that.
Yeah, so Jocelyn's exact words are that they can't afford to lose the confession. Yeah. And the confession is kind of the cornerstone of their wall of evidence. So it's kind of an uphill battle from here on without that confession.
Oh, yeah.
So then we cut to a bench, and Ellie's like, why didn't you stop me? And Alec's like, oh, it's my fault. I felt sorry for you. I didn't expect you to go all Bruce Lee on him. Yeah, you watched the first series more recently than I have. Alec was this funny last season?
So, I mean, I think it was... like, watching it for a second time, I think it was also funnier just because, like, I was familiar with the characters, and it's like, oh, yeah, like, you know, he's not making tea for her, and oh, yeah, he can't eat fish and chips. So, but I think he's definitely nicer to her this season, like, by far. I mean, I think that warm is the wrong word to use for him. Like, he's not a warm person at all. But if he shows any semblance of warmth, it's towards Ellie.
No. Yeah, and maybe you're right, like, maybe just the further along the show goes and the more I know him, it's just little quips like that make him funnier, because he's such a serious guy that when he does joke, it's that much more funny. Then he asks Ellie, like, what have you eaten today? And she goes, a Kit Kat and a Scotch egg. So did you know what a Scotch egg is?
It's like a hard-boiled egg that's inside a sausage.
And, like, deep fried?
I don't know if it's fried, but I know it's an egg inside a sausage.
So I had to look it up. Wait, have you had one before?
But I've, like, seen them. It's the type of thing that, like...
Yeah, I've never heard of them before.
I mean, it's kind of surprising that we don't have them here, I think, because what's more American than an egg inside a sausage?
Or just foods combined in horrible, nightmarish ways.
I don't think that's a horrible, nightmarish way.
Something about it, like, I don't know. But actually, upon, like, reading it, I kind of felt... Because the implication that it's like, a Kit Kat and one Scotch egg, like... I thought that wouldn't be a lot of food, but the Scotch egg looked like a hearty meal. Like something that would keep you full for a long time.
Well, I think also it's the implication that it's like, you know, it's pub food. Like it's not, well, not sad, but it's like greasy and, you know, like not good for you. Like later they go and have salads.
Right. That comes up later. In the next scene, we're back in like jail, and Paul's trying to get Joe to change his plea, and Joe is wearing a really lame like polo shirt.
I didn't notice that.
No, it was kind of making me think is that because every time we see Joe in prison, he's got nice clothes on, not like prison clothes, and I wonder if at this stage in like the British justice system, if whether or not instead of being stuck in like a prison jumpsuit, you get access to nice clothes and a better bed for some reason.
I have no idea.
Because you haven't been charged, or you've been charged but not like convicted. The community has actually been really cool about letting me know when I've got things wrong about the British justice system.
That's good.
Yeah, somebody pointed to me that I completely missed the difference between barristers and solicitors, it's nice. I've got more questions about the system later, but so Paul... so Joe asks Paul, like, oh, tell Tom that I love him and that I'll be coming home soon. And Paul's like, I'm not going to do that, Joe. And Paul's like, whose side are you on? And something about that I was wondering, because, like, Joe wasn't treating Paul very nice last episode, so I'm glad Paul isn't just going to give in and do what Joe asks. But that idea of Joe asking, whose side are you on? It does get me wondering whether or not Broadchurch will become a town divided on this court case. Whether people who never believed Joe could do this come out of the woodwork, stuff like that. Whether there's divisions drawn.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's really hard to defend a potential child murderer. Like,
right.
I don't know.
So, yeah. So then after Paul leaves, he gets a call from Beth, who's at the graveyard. And he lies about where he's at. He doesn't want to tell Beth that he's seen Joe, which is understandable. It's at that moment Beth reveals that her mother's dead, which makes me feel real bad, because at the end of the last episode of Sea Brigade, I was joking about, where did Grandma Latimer go? I thought it would be like a silly plot line that would never get resolved. Like just how sometimes, you know, on shows characters disappear. Right. They get introduced but like this is just like, oh, my mother died. I'm like, oh, like I just felt real bad about it.
Because I watched the series then before episode 2 aired, and she is in the last episode. Like when Alec goes to tell them, like, oh, we've arrested Joe Miller, she's on the couch with them. So like she didn't disappear.
Yeah. Oh, so that's the thing is, I realized too that after I made that joke, and I kept it in the podcast, like I could have erased that to save my own skin. Grandma Latimer didn't disappear as much as I thought she had. She was actually in 7 out of the 8 episodes. I guess I just found her completely forgettable, because in the first episodes I feel like she kept trying to give advice, and then I can't really remember if she did anything besides kind of be in the home all the time.
The episode where Jack dies, Chloe's like reading the paper and she's like, you know, all up in arms and like, we gotta get Jack. And the grandmother says, you know, I know Jack Marshall, like he would not do this. And so they have that exchange.
Then in the next scene, we kind of have Abby and Sharon walking through Broadchurch. as I understand it now, Abby's position is the solicitor. Yeah. So Joe Miller is her client, and when it goes to trial, it was her job to find Joe a barrister. Yes. So like that's Sharon's level of law. Yeah, which is kind of cool now to trying to become familiar with an entirely different justice system. Yeah. So Sharon's cold. She finds out that the autopsy didn't turn up anything new, but she's like, you know what? That might have just been worth it just to rattle Jocelyn.
Yeah.
And that she can see things in such cold terms is just like, she's a great villain, but obviously things aren't black and white, and like she has had some kind of past slight with Jocelyn, so it could be like a revenge thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we don't know what that is, but I mean, obviously we're gonna find out.
And so Abby and Sharon are talking. They find a station cleaner in the Broadchurch Police Department who likes to gossip, and they say station cleaner. I don't know. That might be like a janitor
That's what
position.
I assumed.
But we have like a potential witness or source. So that would be kind of cool. And I love how much Abby and Sharon just kind of diss the town of Broadchurch. Like, oh, what a dump. Like, where are we going to eat here? The only reliable place must be the Thai food. And they complain about Becca's hotel not having any hot water. Yeah, it's just the kind of thing I like. Because, like, oh, like, her hotel's such a dump. And then Becca shows up. And she's like, oh, how were things? And they're like, oh, they were lovely.
Yeah, it's the English way.
Oh, and then Sharon, it just continues to be super intimidating. She's like, oh, Jocelyn will build a wall of evidence and will smash holes in it. So it's, for me, it's kind of intimidating because Charlotte Rampling is such an intimidating figure herself. And there's something about her that, like, I really believe she probably is a really good practicer of law. But the way Sharon is so confident about smashing her little wall metaphor is, like, really, like, we have a good villain here.
Yeah.
If you see Sharon as a villain, she's at least a strong character. Yes. I'm kind of afraid that the wall of evidence is rather filled with holes already. I really don't know how much there is to go on. I'm thinking...
I mean, we were talking about this.
Like, you find Joe with the phone. Yeah, like, you have Joe with a phone. You have the crazy dog lady.
Susan.
Somebody with a body. Susan. Yeah, Susan finds the body, and she says that she saw, like, a bald man.
She said she saw Nigel, right? But she really saw Joe. Because she thought it was Nigel.
And Lucy saw... somebody.
Lucy said she saw a man putting a bag in the trash.
Yes, and so I don't think there's really all that much evidence for Sharon and Abby to smash. But
I think it's interesting because, you know, reading, like, catching up with all of the commentary on season 1, I think a common complaint about that series was that they didn't really catch the criminal. He turned himself in, really, and that was seen as a criticism at the time, but maybe that was actually kind of put in place in preparation for a potential series 2, so that way, because now it's really coming back to bite them, that, yeah, we didn't catch this guy, he turned himself in. We don't have anything really other than his confession.
Yeah. Like, if I had to make a prediction, my prediction is that they'll find a way to prove Joe Miller guilty.
Yeah. I hope so.
Not so guilty that, but, like, not so guilty that we know the jury's decision, that there's still some tension there. I'm like crossing my fingers and thinking that they'll find enough evidence to make it seem in retrospect like, oh, you know what, you guys did have enough stuff. Like, you will eventually, like, even if Joe didn't turn himself in, you might have eventually caught him. Because, like Alec points out, the only 2 contacts in Danny's phone were, like, Tom and Joe. That
is a big part of it.
So Alec decides that Claire and Lee meeting together is an opportunity, not a risk. This is what we're talking about before, like him being kind of just too desperate to make progress somehow in Sandbrook. So Ellie says what we're thinking, which is, what if you're wrong, and what if Lee didn't do this? So thanks to Ellie for kind of being the rational one here. And then I guess Alec tells Claire that he plans on having Lee meet her. She kind of freaks out. So then Ellie takes Claire to go get chips,
was so cute.
And they sit down on the beach. It was, and Ellie's like, you know what I did earlier? I had salad. I hate salad. And I'm like, I'm with you, sister. Just like, screw salad. Get the chips.
Well, so again, I watched a lot of Broadchurch in the past 2 weeks. So I wonder if she got salad so that way Hardy would have salad instead of getting, like, some, because he can't have fattening foods because of his heart condition. So, like, I think she made a sacrifice there.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. That was just my reading of it.
She also complains, like, how can Alec not have crackers in his cottage?
She complained about that? I don't remember.
Yeah, she's like, how can a man, like, you know, with no friends, no whatever, just not have crackers
Oh, no, I
in
think
his
it's
cottage?
how is he not gone crackers, like, gone crazy?
Oh. Okay, so... So, you know what? I was reading the transcript of the episode. Hey, listeners. Normally what I do is I watch the episode a second time, then take notes so that you guys can... You know, this podcast isn't just me bumbling in front of a microphone. This time, the ITV player wasn't working so well, so I went and read the episode transcript. And without the context, it said... The wording was like, how has he not got any crackers, or gone crackers? And I was just like, yeah, I guess that's something to complain about. Why doesn't he have crackers? I knew, okay, yeah. So, alright, having a co-host, obviously we're gonna, the dumb things I say are going to be called out as dumb in the recording instead of later in the comment section. I was thinking, like, that was a strange... I'm like, it's not that weird for a grown man to not have crackers at his house. Like, I might expect him to have chips or pretzels, but...
Oh.
All right. Well, we find out that Claire used to be a hairdresser, and she shagged Lee 3 hours after meeting him, which is all kind of cool. I don't know.
I mean, they're definitely interesting.
Yeah, I liked hearing about how they met. And then Ellie shares how she met Joe when a little old lady in a Nissan crashed into a Land Rover. We found out, I don't remember if this was told last series, but Joe was a paramedic.
It might have been told when when they have the dinner with Alec, but I don't think the specifics weren't.
Yeah, I like that backstory. I noticed nobody was driving a Skoda, the official sponsor of drama on ITV.
Take a break from the drama. I don't know. I keep meaning to look that up, but I forget because it's not that important.
Oh, but like the cute story about how Joe and Ellie met kind of only feels much sadder at this moment.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, watching series 1 again and like seeing them happy, that was brutal.
So Ellie and Claire kind of put their husbands' murders on their backs, like it's their job, or their responsibility to at least find justice, which is, I mean, it's dark, but I guess it takes a lot of guts to do that.
Yeah.
Now we cut to the Latimer house, and scummy Oliver is like, "Oh, we're running a live blog of the trial," and that only makes Oliver seem more scummy. But to me, I think it's also a significant plot point that everything that happens in the trial is being basically live tweeted. That just means, like, if people are paying attention, that something like the confession being thrown out, or like the whole town of Broadchurch finds out that Joe Miller gets beaten as it happens, you know.
Yeah.
So
actually, if I can just make a comment about Oliver for a second, because as I mentioned, I watched the series again this weekend with my dad, and so after episode, I guess it's episode 6 when it ends with the chase and the heart attack. My dad was like, "Oh, like for the longest time I thought it was the plumber guy, meaning Nigel, but now it's just obvious." And I said, "Oh, like who do you think did it?" And he's like, "Oh, it's Ollie, of course." Like he was dead certain that it was Oliver, which I thought was really interesting because he did not cross my mind as a potential suspect, but he was dead certain it was Oliver. So yeah, that's my story about Oliver.
Yeah, no, Oliver's just kind of like, Oliver's more just the type of person who will kiss a co-worker without without being asked to.
No, definitely not killer potential, but it was an interesting theory.
It's hard to describe what the Latimers are doing, but they're kind of throwing a seriously questionable witness party. Yeah. Everyone who can possibly give evidence is all there, including Lucy with her juicy details, maybe. And Jocelyn's invited, and she's reasonably uncomfortable because this could be one of the most illegal things ever if you stop and think about like all the witnesses in one room possibly creating some kind of conspiracy. But she kind of gives like 3 rules. She's like, 1, we have a difficult task. And she kind of includes we as everyone in this room has a task, which is to make Joe Miller guilty. Rule number 2 is don't share evidence, because if anyone confers on evidence, then I think it could probably be thrown out as like a conspiracy. Yeah. Well, and 3.
Oh no, because they're so bad at creating fake. Like Nigel and Mark's alibi was terrible. They're so bad at colluding. So it's She was right to tell them that.
Yeah, and 3, never lie, none of us have anything to hide. And then the camera pans and everyone's like, eesh, I have stuff to hide. So that's kind of great. Joe's conviction isn't just up to me. It's up to all of you in this room and to everyone in this town.
Yeah.
And more, like, the name Broadchurch for the show just kind of feels more and more important just because of how much, like, the town is a character instead of just our small cast. Maggie kind of chases after Jocelyn after she leaves, and Jocelyn asks Maggie to read for her, and both of us thought this relationship was really interesting, worth breaking down.
Oh yeah, I'm really, I don't know what to make of it.
When I stopped to kind of like look at all the clues, like Maggie knew where Jocelyn kept the house key, and they each know a lot about each other. They each like to, like, Jocelyn obviously got a lot of fun out of making fun of her newspaper, like just kind of throwing jibes at her, but also has this really sensitive, would you please read to me type thing. So, at first I maybe thought they were sisters, but neither of them has mentioned that yet, and I feel like if that were the case, it would have been said already.
Yeah, and it wouldn't. I don't think it would be a secret.
No, so I don't know. Like I think they might be lovers.
Maybe they could be like ex BFF kind of thing, like where they were best friends, had a falling out, and now they're kind of like tentatively trying it out again. I don't know, or they could be lovers again. I don't know.
Yeah, I think either could be done really tastefully, but like you said, like Maggie could have been the one who was reporting on the case that Jocelyn kind of dropped the ball on, and that's why she retired from practicing law. By the way, that's something I definitely look forward to getting cleared up in the future. So next we see Becca kind of walking in on Abby working at the hotel, and she's like, oh, do you have everything you need? And Abby's like, yeah, everything except Wi-Fi. And Becca just gives the answer, oh, Wi-Fi's down for the night, I think.
She's totally sabotaging them. She's totally like, oh yeah, like no hot water? Sorry. No Wi-Fi? Sorry.
Oh. I never considered that she was intentionally making their stay in Broadchurch uncomfortable.
Oh, I think so.
Because that I actually like. Otherwise, I was just like, Becca, your in sucks.
No, I think she's like way too devious. I think that's totally what she's doing.
Oh, wow. I actually... now I kind of like that, because Abby is asked to quiet down Sharon because guests are complaining about her chatting on the phone. Like, if she were bumping music, that's something you can make a guest quiet down on. She's just talking on the phone. And the only I was thinking, like, the only thing stopping Abby from leaving a bad Yelp review is that she doesn't have any Wi-Fi. But like, Becca can't see it, but she's typing away a bad review. She's like, I can't wait till I get some Wi-Fi, then I'm going to post this bad review. So Claire agrees to see Lee, and Alec promises she'll be safe, which is like, I don't know.
He's got to stop making these promises.
No. And then, so Joe Miller is coached on how to not look crazy in court. Like, don't make eye contact with jurors, don't agree or disagree with anything by shaking your head, nodding your head. Then the judge shows up, and she's like, oh, I biked to work today. Sorry I'm late. I got lost. And I thought that was really cute for some reason.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I was like, I didn't catch that while listening, but yeah, while reading the script, I'm like, oh yeah, she biked to work. All right. And like you pointed out, it's kind of cool that we have a all-female, like, court cast here. All the lawyers, the judge, all women, and they don't really make a big, like, hoopla out of that. The judge makes some promises, or she sets some ground rules that I think are going to be quickly thrown out. We're going to run this with courtesy, dignity, and respect. And I'm like, by the end of the series, all 3 of those rules are going to be broken.
Episode.
Yeah, like, this court is kind of going to be dirty. Yeah, and she's like, the murdered boy's family is going to be there at all times, so we're going to do this right. And that's one of the things people had problems with as like a legal thing, that the witnesses would all be there. But, legal problem, dramatic gold. Like, it's awesome that we see him there. Yeah, and then I guess Lee's at the courtroom, which is kind of, I guess maybe that was the meeting spot that Alec came up with or something. But Lee's upset at Claire with being with Alec, because Lee's like, where's Claire? And Alec says, I could show you where she is. And Lee's like, she's been with you the whole time. And then Alec's giving all these ground rules about the meeting, and Lee says, you don't control us, which is interesting because he's not upset about the rules Alec is placing on Lee, but on like the conversations and meetup between Lee and his wife. So The Latimers then take the plumbing van to court, and I was thinking, like, they might as well also take a Nige, like, if he wasn't already, like, asleep in the back of the plumbing van. I thought it was kind of a little bit silly how, like, Beth was upset, like, oh, man, we're showing up in a plumber's van. It's like, you got to the court hearing. Then, we're inside the courtroom, and I find out that the glass box that Joe Miller is in is called the dock, yes, which is kind of cool. I guess during the preparation montage, Jocelyn sniffs her horse wig, just like takes it out of the box, just takes a big whiff of wig. And I was, so like last week I thought I was being a little bit maybe disrespectful of being like, oh man, I love the wigs, but apparently I looked on Twitter, I'm not the only one who's obsessed with the wigs. And then people who had a problem, they said, I can't confirm this, but they took some problems with the judge wearing a barrister's wig, not a judge's wig. I don't know either. Someone tweeted something like, my new favorite character on Broadchurch is wigs. One of the other things, I guess, like when we finally see the courtroom, people were like, oh, the Queen's Counsel would never sit to the Junior Counsel. And I before recording this episode, I spent a little bit of time on the Wikipedia trying to find out the difference between the two. I mean, the difference between Queen's Counsel and Junior Counsel, like I kind of understand, like they're the different levels and respects practicing law, but I couldn't tell who was who. I guess my assumption would be like Abby would never sit next to Sharon, but I'm not sure if that's the case. But Beth is called as the first witness, and Sharon does the absolute worst job at feigning sympathy. She says, hi, I have a mother too, and I understand what you're going through, so I'll make this quick. How often did your husband cheat on you and beat your son?
Yeah, that was really gross.
Yeah, we get the idea right up front. Like, Sharon is going to ask the hardest questions first. Like, she's not going to worm her way into something. She's just going to go for the throat. And in her questioning, she asks if Danny knows about the affair, and Beth says she found out that yes, Danny knew about the cheating.
I think he did.
I couldn't remember. Well,
Chloe
that's
knew.
what I couldn't remember. Chloe knew.
I don't.
She says in the transcript at least that yes, Danny knew about the affair.
I know.
But I don't know how he.
I remember her saying that in the show, and that jumped out to me too. I said, I don't think he does, but maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. So the thing is, the affair happened the night he was murdered.
Yeah.
Right. And Mark and Becca met at the house where Danny was murdered.
Yes, but Joe sees them after he's killed Danny.
He's killed Danny. Yeah, I don't know. The transcript said, like, yes, Danny knew about... I mean, like, but whatever. I don't know how
I don't know. Maybe it happened off screen. I don't know.
Yeah, some listener is going to be like, grr, brr, 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 you're so dumb. How did you miss this? But yeah, after the questioning and after having to admit to the public that my husband cheated and hit my son once, I can't help but thinking, like, poor Beth. Like, I know people hate her for how she treats Ellie, but poor her. Like, she goes through so much.
Yeah, I mean, Mark's not the greatest of guys.
So, meanwhile, the Claire Lee meetup is revealed to be Ellie's house, like the Miller household.
What could go wrong?
Yeah. Like, put Ellie in this extremely triggering emotional environment.
It'll be fine.
And Alec is called to testify.
Can I just say something about the testimony? Which, like, in hindsight doesn't make any sense that I thought this, but in the moment. Because Alec has this, like, compulsive need to, like, take the blame for things. Like, obviously, with Sandbrook, he's now hiding Claire, and now he's kind of protecting Ellie. And so I had like the crazy thought, I'm like, oh my god, he's gonna like say that he hit Joe Miller like in the interrogation room, which like isn't.
You're not crazy.
You thought the same thing?
I totally thought that too. I was like, a part of me was like, the one thing Jocelyn wants is for all witnesses to tell the truth, and a part of me was like, a part of me thought Alec was going to lie right then and there that how did Joe Miller get hit? Like, oh, like I hit him. Like, I don't know why. Maybe if we go back and watch again, like the music was suggesting that type of thing.
Maybe I think also just knowing him.
If there was like a musical cue, I guess it was just to ramp up the tension for Sharon's line of questioning.
Yeah.
So Sharon's suggestion is that Alec forced Joe to confess with force, having been recently called Britain's worst cop. She moves to the broken rib that he sustained from Ellie's beating, which is harder than I thought Ellie was attacking him, but damn good shots, Ellie.
Well, actually, I read that in real life, like, he was wearing padding, but she bruised him. So she was going at it pretty hard.
And Hardy admits that he broke procedure by letting her even get in the room. Sharon says she kicked the living daylights out of him. And then it cuts to the Latimers, who for some reason I thought they would be like, smiling, like, haha, like, good job, you kicked him. But you can see, like, they're immediately concerned about the implications.
Yeah.
And Sharon keeps arguing, like, and you just stood there and let him get kicked. Even though he kept saying, like, that's not how it happened, I removed him. So, we already see right now what kind of, like, practitioner Sharon is, in spite of what Alec is actually saying.
It's ridiculous, too, because there's obviously CCTV footage from within the interrogation room. Like, anybody can see that he runs in and pulls her off.
Yeah, so it's, like, it's totally frustrating. It's not like, oh, it's unrealistic. Like, I feel like being kind of a jerk is exactly how people get off of crimes. Yeah. So, she says, like, under Section 76 and 78 of PACE, like, I commend you to throw out the confession. And I went around and, like, looked up on some, like, shady-looking law websites. Section 76 and 78 of PACE, which is the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1984, says that confession obtained by oppression can be thrown out, or like unfair evidence can be thrown out of court. So her suggestion being that technically, since Joe Miller could have been beaten by Hardy at the Miller household, he could have been beaten, then taken to the police station with the cameras, and then that beating could have been staged to match like Hardy's own like physical violence. And because of that, like, hypothetical what if, the confession's thrown out, which some people had a problem with, but I'm like, you know what, Jocelyn knew that could have happened. Jocelyn says all they need to do is to imply a connection, and that if the judge thinks for a second that it's evidence obtained by oppression or unfair evidence, boom, like that's
right. We did have fair warning.
You know, Alec Hardy takes it well when he shows up to greet Allie. He's like, it's done, it's gone, nothing to do about it. For me, there just must be like his experience with Sandbrook and how quickly evidence can just disappear.
Yeah.
Like Ellie's a little bit less ready to deal with that, but Alec, kind of the experienced cop here, is just like, all right, that's it, it's done. And I kind of feel like he's also talking to us, the viewer. Like, if any viewers out there are coming up with ideas about how they can get the confession back, I don't think that's going to happen.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, and the one confession that I think is still in play is when Mark meets Joe in custody.
Oh.
Joe doesn't say to Mark, I'm sorry I didn't do this. He says, like, I'm sorry, it's not like how you thought. I never touched him. Like, he says a lot of things that implicates a relationship. Yeah, I feel like that interaction is the one thing that could still... you know, but
I mean, that's if, depending on what happens next week, if Mark is still regarded as a credible witness, and if they have that on videotape.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like Mark needs to go up next. Like, if we're looking at, like, in the order of, like, juicy witnesses, like, we need to get someone big up next, since we already had Beth and Alec. Like,
yeah, and he is not doing himself any favors.
Yeah, because speaking of, Mark is continuing his, like, FIFA hang time with Tom. You know, he makes things a little bit less weird this week, telling Tom that this hangout time is more paternal. If it were like me in your dad's position, like, I would hope that Joe would have done the same thing for Danny. So, you know, we at least have some comfort knowing that Mark Tom time is less creepy than Joe Danny time.
So actually, I didn't follow up on this, but there were some comments on the subreddit discussion threads of the episode that, like, when Mark is covering his face, like, crying, he's, like, grinning.
Were they suggesting that
like he was being insincere, that he's trying to rope Tom in to do something for him, but, like, we don't know what he wants him to do. But I didn't check back up on that.
Yeah. Oh man. That would certainly be dirty. Yeah. So he wants Tom to maybe do something to help the case, you think?
I mean, unless he's going, like, completely nuts and is gonna... unless he's... I mean, I don't think he would commit an act of violence against Tom.
Kill.
I don't...
Yeah. I think that would be one of the cheesiest... Yeah. Not cheesy.
It wouldn't
like,
be
it would
good.
just be, like, dramatically disappointing if, like, it just flipped the whole thing on its head and now I've killed your son. Like, Mark's
it would not be
good. Do that. So what happens next is Alec bugs the heck out of the Miller house with cameras and microphones. I thought it was really funny. I think Alec uses a
flip cam. Yeah, I thought so too.
Camera, which I'm like, I had one of those. It became irrelevant real fast, unfortunately.
Yeah, I never had one. But, like, they're so big. You think he couldn't get, like, something smaller? Well, I guess he's not really working in police anymore, right. So resources are limited.
No, he's, like, working with whatever he can get his hands on. You know what? The flip camera was, like, surprisingly good at capturing concert audio. Like, I used it at Nine Inch Nails, and I got really good audio quality from a concert, which if you ever tried to film a concert, you know that's hard to do. Like, your iPhone definitely couldn't do that. I just like, all right. Like, it has some use nowadays, like hiding it behind birthday cards in order to capture footage, which in the United States, you wouldn't be able to use that as evidence, right?
Yeah, I mean, probably in the UK, you're probably not able to either. I think he's just, like, insanely desperate. Like, I don't know what he expects to do, to go into the police and say, like, here, he confessed.
Yeah. You know, the darker part of me was, like I was wondering if he was just hoping to catch Lee doing something awful to Claire.
I don't think so.
But Claire says, like, Claire's convinced that Lee won't hurt her, and he's like, he's never been rough unless I asked him to be rough. I think what she is fearing is their chemistry, because she's got, like, butterflies in her stomach and maybe falling back with him.
I agree.
Because she describes him as, like, an addiction. So, right. Anyways, so Nige breaks into the Latimer house, and Beth is like, how many times is this going to happen? Stop breaking into our house. Which is great, but Nige is like, oh my god, you won't believe it. Ellie's moving back home.
He's such an idiot.
Like, he saw Ellie, like, standing outside and was like, oh, she's moving back. That's what's happening. So Lee comes relatively unarmed. Like, he's just got a Swiss pocket knife. I don't know. He thinks Alec's security is kind of crazy. This is all stuff, again, that leads me to think that he's innocent. Yeah, so I don't think... So Claire is not in on the fact that Alec has the room bugged.
Neither is Ellie.
Which is something that I think is interesting, because if they stayed in the room much longer, Claire might have given stuff up too. And so Lee seems most concerned about what Alec is making her do, because he says, he hasn't made you wear a wire, has he? It's not like, are you wearing a wire? He's concerned that Alec is making her wear a wire. And it might... we might be able to think that he's convinced that Alec made her testify against him.
I mean, he strikes me as the possessive type.
Yeah, the way he unbuttons her shirt, like, right back in it. Yeah, again, these are the things that make Lee suspicious, or at least creepy. Yeah, I don't know, but, like, some people were, like, talking, like, how Claire previously said, like, he was never rough unless I asked him to be rough. That, like, this first move is more like a chemistry thing more than, like, a power thing. We won't know until we get back next week.
Right.
But, like, this time, like, I don't know, my idea right now might be that they're conspirators somehow.
Oh, I completely agree.
Anyways, so Beth shows up and assaults a police officer. She's like, is this what you did to Joe? Ellie's like, could you stop hitting me? And Beth is, I'm enjoying it, and I'll do more than push you in a minute. And her idea that Ellie would beat Joe just to free him, like to make his confession null and void, is just a little bit crazy. I mean, like, but I don't blame Beth exactly, because this whole town's pastime and tradition is crazy conspiracy.
I mean, Nige is the one who told her that she was moving back in. Like, she could have just been going in to get, like, a bra or something. Like, yes, they're holding a highly illegal witness confession thing, but, no one has to know.
Yeah, so Beth, Ellie's like, all right, this seriously isn't the time for this. And then Beth's water breaks, which is also Ellie's fault.
God damn it, Ellie.
And then meanwhile, in all this chaos, Claire and Lee Ashworth escape, / disappear, / she's kidnapped,
Unlikely.
Which is exactly, or upstairs shagging.
I think that's highly likely.
The old Miller bed.
As gross as it is, but I think that's highly likely.
Yeah, and we've talked about this privately, but I think a real hard thing to watch would be for Ellie to have to discover that happening in her old bed.
Yeah.
And then we have Alec running out to a field and just thinking, like, oh my god. Oh, so, like, I guess there's one thing that I missed in the, in reading the transcript, anything that didn't have dialogue didn't make it into the transcript. So I'm realizing now that at the end of the notes that the one thing we didn't talk about was Alec finding the bluebell that's wrapped in the envelope addressed to Claire, and that Claire's keeping with her possessions. Yeah. Because that bluebell as a symbol can mean a lot. Because it's from Sandbrook. we kind of have flashback shots of Pippa and Pippa. Oh, I can't remember the other one.
Lisa.
Yeah, I totally pronounced it. I thought it was Pepper.
I thought it was Pepper too.
Alex. That's just his accent at work. It wasn't until I saw it written out. I'm like, okay, Pippa and Lisa.
Now I'm because I was
kind of see them running around.
No, I was just because I remember reading a couple of days ago. I was reading like a recap thing about a girl named Pippa, and I'm like, I don't remember Pippa, but I do remember a Pepper. But it was Pippa.
So the bluebell, obviously something to do with Sandbrook, and that she keeps it and doesn't just throw it away could be a sign of her continued love for Lee or something, or like they're. But then, yeah, that's something that, I don't know, I feel like Alec then might have reason to suspect Claire.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's very we don't know much about his inner workings, but he appears to be very trusting of her, and I don't think that trust is particularly justified.
No. For me, at least, it would be a very pleasant twist if this whole time he's kept Claire close by because he secretly suspects her. Like, that would make me happy, because then Alec wouldn't be as incompetent or blind as we're suspecting, but I'm thinking that Bluebell, if anything, is then the beginning of this doubt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he has shown... last season he was shown to be very perceptive, especially with Tom and Joe. I don't know. Again, I feel like this desperation is kind of putting a blind... maybe it's kind of a reverse situation of last year last series, where Ellie was too close to the situation and only Hardy could really see the big picture, whereas now Alec is so deeply obsessed and with this case that maybe Ellie will be the one who says, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And she's already kind of doing that, I think, where she says, are you sure?
I think then, if we think this whole thing is a trilogy, that the perfect third series would be each of them having kind of flubbed up the case, the two of them being at the top of their game for like one final case.
Yeah, that would be nice.
The only thing is, if it's another murder, that would be like really stretching.
Yeah. Although, like the murder's already... If it's Sandbrook, the murder's already happened. Unless another Sandbrook murder happens. I don't know.
Oh. Yeah, because if we get to the end of this season with Lee and Claire being innocent, then them actually trying to solve that would be kind of alright.
Yeah,
But yeah, that was Series 2, Episode 2. Seriously excited for more Broadchurch. Like, at the end of every week, as much time as I spend thinking about and talking about and analyzing and dissecting Broadchurch, still excited for more.
Oh, yeah.
Hope ITV Player works a little bit better. Granted, it's not being used in the country it's meant to be used in. So who knows what magic is, at work there.
Mine's been pretty okay. Like, I hold my breath sometimes during the commercial breaks because it can get a little funny there, but it's been mostly okay.
And oh my god, note to all British viewers, which is great that there are some. It's kind of right now. Actually, the Google Analytics right now says that like most of the viewers of the YouTube video version of the podcast come from the United States. Yeah, but word to the British viewers. Just judging from the ITV commercials, you guys use a lot more puppets than the United States does in their... No, like the Italian... Like,
the lasagna
Italian
thing?
Sauce. Oh my god, it was adorable.
I thought it was kind of creepy, personally.
Okay, I kind of thought creepy, but I was like, at least it exists. I'm like, I was happier with there being puppets than not puppets. I don't know, because like here we got so much crap CGI.
Yeah.
Like horrible looking computer animated mascots.
Yeah.
And it's just like, get it off the screen.
Yeah.
Kill it.
All those Skoda, which I'm looking it up now, and Skoda is apparently, it's a brand of car. It's a Czech car manufacturer.
Yeah, I don't know why. I also thought maybe it was like car insurance or something.
Take a break from the action.
Because it's like, yeah. Bless you, Skoda. Everyone who's a sponsor of ITV, way to go. No, honestly, I feel good watching the show with ads because I feel like I am somehow supporting ITV, and then at other times I think I'm watching ads for things I can't buy, so I'm kind of still wasting their time and money, but I don't know. You know what? A part of me actually kind of hopes that ITV is aware of how many people are coming to their site from the United States, because I think it would be a shame if they looked at the numbers and thought viewership was declining without knowing like how many people in the world are streaming Broadchurch from around the world.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's got to be some intern in charge of that, but I don't know.
According to my Audacity thing, we're going around like an hour and like 16 minutes.
Yes, mind you.
I'm sure that after I cut out all the ums and breaks and silence, we'll probably be down to like maybe an hour flat. Yeah, that's it. So there's only 2 thank yous. Of course, I have to thank everyone who is emailing me with feedback, be it through emails or voicemails. And all feedback can be sent to seabrigadepodcast@gmail.com. There's also a Sea Brigade Twitter account, which right now I'm kind of just using to spam the Broadchurch feed, so to get people to watch or listen to Sea Brigade. Like I said, we should be on iTunes, and we're definitely on YouTube. Actually, if you type in Sea Brigade, it should be one of the first things that comes up. But you can type Sea Brigade Podcast, that should show up. And the thank yous, of course, go to Kevin MacLeod for Beach Party, which is the opening music, and So Close by Oliver Arnolds. I don't know if that's how you pronounce the name.
So. That's how I've been pronouncing it.
Yeah, but thanks to that guy for doing the music, which you should be hearing right now at the end of this podcast. And I guess for doing the music in the whole series. I had no idea, but he's a guy who does all the music in the series and actually buried the answer to the first season in the lyrics, which is crazy. So I'm not going to listen to the lyrics of the
I think the new one is like So Far Away. Yeah.
So Far, which is kind of the exact opposite of So Close. So thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.